Good evening, friends. Welcome to another Wednesday night. Summer, August. Can you believe that? It's August 4th, 2021, and we're here for another episode of Ask the Pastor. I'm Aaron Rosenau, one of the pastors at Faith Lutheran Church in Appleton, Wisconsin. If you just happen to be just stumbling upon us, and I not every week, but quite regularly have an Ask the Pastor session, especially during the summer. The schedule is a little bit disjointed. Don't always have Ask the Pastor because of vacation schedules and other kinds of travel schedules and such. So back for another session. Hello, Carla, and anybody else who is watching tonight. Debbie, and those are just a couple who are chiming in the comments and saying hello. I am with you, so welcome. And anybody else who is on tonight or watching after the fact. One of the great things about Facebook Live, you wouldn't get to ask your questions live, but if you're watching afterwards, Facebook actually keeps all these videos for us on our Facebook page. And so you can, and I know many people do this, watch afterwards, watch the next day or even days or weeks later. So I'm humbled. I really honored that you would join me on a Wednesday night or whenever it is that you're watching after the fact and tuning in. So tonight I want to address a couple of things. One of those, first of all, one of those questions that I get asked these days quite often, and that is about the series The Chosen. I have people ask me, and over the last several months in particular, have asked, uh, what do you think about The Chosen? Um, so if you aren't familiar with this series, it's all on the internet. It's a series that has been developed. It's the first multi-season series on the Bible, and specifically, it's a series about the ministry of Jesus with his disciples. It's what's called The Chosen. He's it's really kind of focusing on those men and women that Jesus chose to follow him in his earthly ministry. Uh, the Chosen started off as a YouTube series. First season was 8 episodes. It's directed by Dallas Jenkins. He's directed, helped to write the script and all that. Um, Pretty young guy, Dallas Jenkins. I would guess in his early 40s. That's just my guess. I don't know this for sure, but um, pretty young guy doing this series. First series was 8 episodes. It's all on YouTube. First 4 episodes of season two were also on YouTube, but then they switched over. I think for a number of reasons, but they switched over to actually stream live uh, on their Angel Studios app, and so you can actually, if you have a smart TV, you can run it off your digital device on the app, the Angel Studios app, and then stream it on your TV, and which we've done for the second half of season two. So there are two full seasons of 8 episodes each out there called The Chosen. If you go to YouTube, you can easily just type in The Chosen, and you'll see the first 12 episodes there. And so, anyway, a lot of people have asked, what do I think? And so, I thought I'd share just a few of my thoughts about The Chosen. Um, one thing is that I actually like about The Chosen is that almost every single actor that you will see on the series is someone that you've never seen before. So, sometimes when you're watching a movie or a TV show, a commercial or something like that, and you see somebody that you recognize, and you almost associate another character with that person. I know, as an example, Star Wars has almost ruined a lot of people to whoever acts in those movies. You almost associate that person with whatever part they played in Star Wars or whatever. And one of the things about The Chosen is it's very fresh in that you don't recognize the actors, um, because, and which is not to say that they're not good. They're actually very good actors, but you don't start to make those connections with other TV shows or other commercials or other movies, because in general you just have never seen them before, which is really really great that they bring in some new talent and that kind of thing. Um, Let me say first off that I think The Chosen is great, but I do want to now to do this up front is actually share some cautions I have about The Chosen. And then I'll really, if you want to ask some questions, I will be able to see very easily because it's right next to my camera, the comments that you type into the comments section. So if you want to ask some follow-up questions about what I'm saying, or oh, well, what about this, Pastor? Or is this true? Or whatever, um, then feel free to type that in the comments, and I'll be able to see that and follow along with it. So, but let me first, again, I think The Chosen is great. I've enjoyed it. It's a great series, but a couple of cautions before just wholesale endorsing The Chosen. One of the things that probably my biggest caution is is the same for any kind of Hollywood style production about the Bible, and that is that there are so many gaps in information and setting and scenery and characterization about the people who are in the Bible that in order to fill that out in visual form, you have to take some amount of artistic license in filling in those gaps. And and sometimes when you're watching something like the series The Chosen or a movie like The Passion of the Christ or anything else that is produced in a visual form, in depicting the Bible and its stories and its truth, um, the challenge with it is that it's hard to distinguish what is truly written in the Bible and what is artistic license. So the thing is, you really have to know your Bible in order to know what is accurate historically and that's recorded for us and what we believe is the inspired word of God, right? God gave this to human authors to write down for us and for all generations to come. So they have this written word of God. And so we believe that it's an accurate and faithful portrayal of historical events. Well, you have to know what the Bible says about those historical events so that you know what is true to the Bible and what the director or writer, producer of this series is is depicting as artistic license. I'll give you a few examples of this in the series The Chosen. And if you've seen it, you kind of know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, then when you watch it, maybe this will sort of pique your interest or whet your appetite for actually checking it out. And by the way, the each of the episodes in the series is under an hour, so you could very much binge watch over a weekend all the episodes of a season of The Chosen, maybe on a rainy day or something, after the Olympics are over and you're not watching the Olympics anymore, something like that. Just watch The Chosen. Anyway, so if you've seen it, if you're going to see it, here are a few examples of what I mean by artistic license. That is just not what the Bible teaches. Um, it's not to say that it couldn't be, and maybe this is the way it was, but we just don't know this because of what the Bible tells us. But as an example, one of the early episodes of season one of The Chosen, um, Thomas, one of the disciples of Jesus, at the time when we're introduced to Thomas, he's not a disciple of Jesus yet, but he is depicted in the series as the wine steward who is responsible for having enough wine for the wedding banquet in Cana, where Jesus and some of his disciples and his mother are attending this wedding, and they run out of wine. And Thomas is the one who is supposed to have the wine for everybody. And And so then he starts to panic because people are drinking wine and they're running out. And then, well, okay, what are you going to do? And so Thomas is depicted as this one who is the wine steward. Well, there's no indication at all in the New Testament that that person who was at the wedding of Cana, who was responsible for the wine, was Thomas, or that Thomas had that vocation even. And so there's some kind of, trying to overlap characters where there's the disciple of Jesus and, okay, well, there's this person who must have been really astonished and overwhelmed by the fact that his reputation is saved by the fact that Jesus turned water into wine, which is described in John chapter 2. But that person who is responsible for the wine, or who is the master of the banquet, as John 2 tells us, that person is never named. And so, the Dallas Jenkins and those who produced The Chosen have sort of taken artistic license and said, maybe the one who was amazed and overwhelmed with joy at the saving his reputation by Jesus became his disciple. And well, one of the disciples we don't know anything about is, in reputation wise, is Thomas. So why not? So, throw that vocation on this person of the Bible, Thomas. And um, it's just artistic license. Okay, I'm not saying it couldn't be. I wouldn't guess that it would be, but that's what the Chosen series has chosen to depict. And so that's one example. Another example is John chapter 1 tells us about uh, Peter and Andrew, Simon Peter and his brother Andrew, who approach Nathanael, who is also from Bethsaida, we're told, and and they tell him about the Christ, and they say he's from Nazareth, and Nathanael says, well, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And then when he actually meets Jesus, Jesus has this line where he says, Nathanael, I saw you when you were underneath the fig tree when Peter and Andrew approached you. And so it's like, oh, Jesus even knows what was going on when he said, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And so, well, the Chosen series has taken a little bit of license with this character Nathaniel, who's one of the followers of Jesus, by saying that he is an architect and that he was uh, he was shamed and discredited as an architect because a wall in a building that was being constructed in Caesarea Philippi was while it was under construction, it collapsed, and some people were hurt in that. And again, this is all happening in one of the episodes of The Chosen. Um, we don't know that Nathaniel was an architect. We don't know that there really was that sort of vocation in the way that we think of, a draftsman who puts together plans and that kind of thing in those days. But Nathaniel's depicted as an architect, and having worked in Caesarea Philippi, which is a place where Jesus would later go with his disciples, and it's a pagan city, non-Jewish city. But the Bible doesn't tell us anything about Nathaniel, that he had that vocation or anything like that. But again, just artistic license. One of the bigger ones, though, in The Chosen, the third example I'll share with you is the character, um, the character of Matthew, whom we're told about in the Gospels. Matthew is one of the disciples um, of Jesus, one of the early followers of Jesus, one of the 12, the one that we believe wrote the first gospel called Matthew, or the gospel according to Matthew. And Matthew in the series The Chosen is characterized. He is a tax collector, and he is in The Chosen. And the Bible tells us he's a tax collector, and he leaves his tax collector booth in order to follow Jesus. We're told that in the Bible. But The Chosen depicts Matthew, characterizes him as having autism or Asperger's, somewhere on the autism spectrum anyway. Almost like he has some savant type of qualities. He's very good with math, and he can figure things very quickly, and yet he's very socially awkward, and has some of those kind of characteristics of someone with autism or on that spectrum. And no, I'm not saying that it could not be that Matthew had autism, but there's no indication whatsoever from the Gospels that that's true of Matthew, that he was um, that he was anywhere on autistic spectrum, and um, and so, but the Chosen series and Dallas Jenkins has chosen to depict Matthew in that way, and and, and I think for a reason, in order to you know sort of depict that Jesus is calling all sorts of people. He's calling men and women. He's calling people with all kinds of character flaws and physical and cognitive disabilities, right? I mean, he's just calling all kinds of people with a history of demon possession, like Mary, and he's calling people who have a temper, like Peter, and he's calling people who are arrogant and brash, like James and John, and uh, he's calling all kinds of people like this to himself, and so I understand uh, why Dallas Jenkins chose to depict Matthew in that way. Um, but again, it's just artistic license. And again, my biggest caution with this is that it really is this. You really have to know the story of the Bible in order to be able to cut through, well, is that something the Bible teaches us, or is that something that that the directors of The Chosen just chose to add in there? That's a little bit of artistic licensing. Like, where's the line there exactly? And now, if you're watching The Chosen and it drives you to the Bible, then God be praised. That's probably the best scenario. Is that you watch it, you're intrigued, you know. The, the, there's certain emotional things about it that sort of draw you in. That's not necessarily a bad thing, and then it, it it piques your interest some more, and you want to read what the Bible says, and then you pour through the Gospels, and you say, well, okay, well, there's nothing about that in the Gospels, there's nothing about that in the Gospels, but okay, fine, they're filling in the gaps. There are a lot of gaps, and so we can, in order to put it in visual form, we have to do that. Well, um, you have to know what the Bible says in order for you to know what settings, characterization, dialogue is biblical when and what's artistic license. Okay, again, that's my biggest caution. Um, Another thing with the Chosen, this is not a really big thing. It's just there's some things that um, are a bit cheesy, if I could say it that way. Um, so I've been to Israel a few times. Been to the Holy Land. I've seen actually the land where Jesus walked with his disciples, where David lived, and all that kind of thing. And number one, the style of music that you would sort of expect of the Middle East is not what they sing. They don't sing very often in The Chosen, but when they do, my personal opinion is that some of the songs are just a bit cheesy. I don't want that to ruin that. I don't want that to ruin the series for you. Don't get caught up in that. Um, Maybe a bigger issue is sometimes um, there are these what I just call anachronistic expressions. What I mean by anachronistic is that um, like anachronism is something that doesn't fit historically. So you put something modern into a historical setting, and it'd be like um, having somebody on the set of or who's on in the scene of The Chosen who's wearing a wristwatch or something. Like, oh, they forgot. Oh, they're like gas street lamps or something that are totally out of place. They're anachronistic. Well, they do a really good job of setting the scenery, the costuming, and all that to be period appropriate, but there's certain expressions that they add to the dialogue that I just kind of think are, modern expressions that are thrown in, and maybe it's just to pique interest, it's to add some relatability to it, if you will. So as an example, there's the one scene where Jesus actually is using humor as he's walking with the disciples, and they're stunned that he says it, and he uses this very very short saying. He says, "Too soon." Like something has happened in their background, and they're shocked because they're still sort of reeling from it. I can't remember exactly what the scene was. It's almost like yeah, I don't. I won't speculate. I can't remember exactly what the scene is, but something's been a little bit traumatic for them, and he makes a joke about it, and they're kind of taken aback, and he says, "Too soon." Well, that's a very very modern expression that is just kind of thrown into the dialogue. It's fine. I think it's a little cheesy, but again, that doesn't ruin it. Um, for me, some of the bigger challenges, the the artistic license. And then, like I said, I've been to Israel a few times, and uh, the, the Chosen is filmed in Texas, which is uh, very different geographically than Israel. And so, if you've ever been to Israel, I always tell everybody once you go to Israel, it sort of ruins you forever to anything that's produced in the United States that's not on location in Israel because it just doesn't look like that. And the trees that are present in a lot of the scenes of The Chosen are just not trees you see over in the Holy Land, and so it just kind of okay, well, it doesn't feel authentic to me because I've been there. Um, Again, don't let that ruin it. It's it's fine. Um, those are just some of my cautions or critiques of The Chosen. Not really major things. I mean, it's not theological issues I normally have with The Chosen. Actually, on the positive side, overall, I think The Chosen is a really fantastic series. Um, it, it's actually one that helps to bring the Bible to life, which is probably um, the the most probably the strongest uh, positive to the Chosen series is that it just helps to bring some of those characters and some of the stories, some of the episodes that you see in the New Testament and the Gospels about life and ministry of Jesus brings it out, and you see it visually, and it sort of brings it to life in a way that you've never experienced before. I think that's great. Um, I think that for that reason, The Chosen has really been what we might just call fresh water for millions of people watching this series, refreshing people's souls. People I've seen in my own family, my friends, people who are eagerly awaiting the next episode. They say, "Okay, I know it's Sunday night. The next episode's coming out, and I'm really excited for it." And that's great. I mean, it's something to look forward to. Getting in the Bible, like I said, especially if it pushes you to read the Gospels even more. That's a great, great thing. That's certainly a positive. I'm going to address really quickly a question from Nia, who says at the end of season two, Jesus was arrested and questioned. Did this happen? It's a good question. Yeah, I don't think it's at the end of season two. I think it's in the middle of season two, actually. But yeah, there's one episode where, uh, and you sort of feel it coming throughout the episode. Something's going to happen. They're sort of after Jesus for questioning. There's not an indication that Jesus, in that way or at that time, was ever arrested or taken into custody, if you will, and questioned and then just released. There were many times when he was questioned by, especially the Jewish leaders. Um, we don't have indication that he was questioned before his final arrest, before his crucifixion by the Romans, but um, it's depicted that in Capernaum, where Jesus was doing most of his ministry, where there is a Roman outpost where there's some of the higher ups in the Roman military authority are. A man named Quintus in the series has Jesus brought in and questions him and actually sends him off and it says, I kind of like him, which is very interesting. Again, artistic license, but that there, as far as I know, no indication that that was something that happened with Jesus in the Gospels. Just kind of pointing out that there is this growing opposition among the Jewish people and the Romans, curious who this guy is. He's getting attention from people, and but that he was brought in, arrested, and questioned, probably not. Not that we know of from the Gospels. All right. So thank you for asking that question. I was going to get that a little bit earlier and then just kept going. But anyway, back to some of the real positives about the Chosen series. I think another one of the, besides just that fresh water that it brings the Bible to life and offers that the refreshment for people's souls, that longing for the truth and seeing the Bible lived out, seeing it visually, because you can read it and you use your imagination, but there's something about seeing it in visual form that is powerful. I think that's good. Um, Another thing is the biblical connections that are made in The Chosen. And what I mean by that is that there are episodes, in fact, a lot of the episodes open with the whole episode opens with a scene from the Old Testament. So it's looking to the hundreds or thousands of years before Jesus, and depicting it. It'll say, Bethlehem, 1000 BC or something like that, and then it'll tell a little bit of a story. Um, so there are episodes like that, that last just a few minutes at the beginning of episodes, but it helps to draw connections from the Old Testament episodes to the New. Some of those are actually hinted at in the New Testament itself, in the Gospels, as they tell the story. And so they're, Dallas Jenkins and those who are producing The Chosen are drawing those out and highlighting them. An example of, they start off one episode, um, and it's and right in the middle of season one, where Jesus has this interaction with Nicodemus at night. And Nicodemus comes to Jesus, and which is a powerful scene, by the way. Um, but to set up that episode, the very beginning depicts Moses crafting a bronze snake to put up on a pole, which happens in the book of Numbers, and which is described in John 3 very briefly before Jesus talks about um, God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son in John 3:16. And, and so Jesus references that moment in John 3. And so in The Chosen, in that episode, they begin that with Moses crafting that bronze snake, because there are all these snakes that are biting people and they die. And God says, okay, lift up a bronze snake, and anybody who looks to the snake will live. And all they have to do is have faith that all they have to do is look at the snake and believe God at his word, and he's going to heal them. Well, then they go into the episode about John 3:16. Another example, um, Jesus is about to be questioned about uh, the fact that he's healing people on the Sabbath. His disciples are walking through the grain fields and picking some of the heads of grain and eating them on the Sabbath, which is supposed to be a day of rest where you do no work. And Jesus in the book of Mark actually references David. He says, "Don't you know what David did when he ate the consecrated bread, which was only lawful for the priests and their families to eat?" And so the episode actually begins 1,000 years almost before Jesus, with David coming in and begging for some food from the priests, and the priest giving the bread to David. And so you make these biblical connections from the Old Testament to the New Testament. And I think that's great. It's one of the things that The Chosen is doing really well as they're depicting these scenes from the Gospels. Um, Another great thing is I mentioned just sort of bringing things to life, but some of the emotion. I know some of my classmates from the seminary, some fellow pastors might really question the fact that we really should not use emotion because emotions are not trustworthy. But I, yes, we should not lean on our emotions. However, God created our emotions and they are good, and He can utilize those emotions in order uh, to to draw out certain truth, in order to heighten the truth, in order to um, give us a fuller experience of His truth. So, I mentioned the scene of Jesus and Nicodemus. I thought the way that that was depicted was powerfully emotional, where Nicodemus is just in utter awe of the fact that the the Messiah is God in the flesh, and he's realizing that he's longed his whole life to see the Messiah, and now he's standing in front of him, and he's overcome with this, and it's really cool scene. I really liked it. It's one of my favorite scenes in the series, and I think that that really helps to build on powerful moments in the Gospels, by utilizing that very strong emotional tie to the story. Another example I think was really powerful was when Jesus healed Mary, who we believe is Mary Magdalene, um, one of the close followers of Jesus who had been possessed by demons and was out of control. And Nicodemus is actually an artistic license. Nicodemus is actually depicted as one who um, tries an exorcism on Mary to get rid of the demons, and it doesn't work. And then one of the reasons why he believes that Jesus is the Messiah, because the witnesses are saying it was Jesus, and Mary is testifying it was Jesus who was the one who released me from these demons. And so Nicodemus is like, you did something I couldn't do. I'm one of the leaders of Israel, of the Jewish people, and I couldn't do it, but you did. And that's part of what makes him just so in awe of Jesus. And again, some artistic license there, but it's just a sort of a powerful scene where Mary is overcome with the emotion of being freed from her prison, and anybody who has been imprisoned by addiction or depression or um, any literal prison, you sort of you get that freedom that comes from being released from your sin, from guilt, from shame, and that kind of thing. So um, again, drawing on emotion. The miraculous catch of fish when Jesus tells Peter to throw the nets on the other side because they've been out, they haven't caught any fish, and okay, he throws the nets down, and then there's such a large amount of fish that others have to come and help, and starting to break the nets. There's so many fish, and that moment where Peter just is overcome, and he's a tough guy, right? He's a strong fisherman type, um, sort of self-reliant type, and he that it's a powerful emotional scene. And there are all kinds of them like this that I think are a great testimony to the Gospels by people of faith who have produced this series, The Chosen. I just think it's really cool. So that's another strong positive for The Chosen. Um, and I think maybe the biggest one, and I think this is the very intent of the series, The Chosen. Why it is called The Chosen is because the series depicts very well the truth that Jesus called the least likely of people to be his followers. He picked Mary, who was possessed by demons. He picked Peter, um, who was a hothead and self-reliant. He picked um, James and John, who are depicted throughout as sort of interested in looking good and having a prestigious position, and why are we out here digging in the fields and we should be doing something else, and like they're sort of depicted in this way that the Gospels actually depict James and John. And so the series is sort of point out, and I mentioned too, Matthew, who the Chosen depicts as having autism. Um, you know, very, very unlikely. If you're gonna create a team of people who are gonna tell the world about Jesus, about salvation, about forgiveness of sins, about the resurrection of the dead, I mean, you're not gonna choose some of these people who are not exactly the best of leaders. They're not the they come with a lot of baggage. They have hang-ups and habits and they have all kinds of history that just you know would disqualify them from the team, except Jesus chooses them, and it sort of emphasizes that this is by grace, and Jesus is shown to be one who is merciful and compassionate over and over and over again, which is exactly what the Gospels depict Jesus as, and which we hold on to as part of our faith, right? He's compassionate and merciful, and when the disciples mess up and they do over and over and over and over and again, they disappoint Jesus. They fail to understand. They just left and right, and still Jesus calls them. He knows it's going to happen, and he calls them anyway. He knows them fully, and he calls them anyway. And so you can have some bit of hope when you fail, when you fall, when you disappoint, when you have shame, when you have history, when you have hang-ups, when you have habits that are ungodly, God can choose me too. And you too are chosen by God. And I think that's really one of the strongest things with this series, The Chosen. And I think why it has become so popular. And um, if you sort of talk with any of your Christian friends, they've they probably they've probably seen it, and many non-Christians as well. And I think that's a positive thing. Anything that can bring out that truth of God's amazing love and grace, that we're saved not because of what we do, but because of His great compassion and His sacrifice. I think that's great. So again, overall, I just think that the series is very powerful, um, in a good way. And overall, I think, let that series, and every single time you watch an episode, let it just drive you to reading the Bible itself. And don't let it replace reading the Bible, because, again, there's a lot of artistic license and filling in gaps that, you know, are some of them are justified and some of them are, eh, not quite sure. So again, just let it send you right to your Bible to read it and understand it and know where that line is between what's truly history and what is just um, some license they have taken in order to fill in the gaps. So I'll pause, and I'm okay if we even take the rest of the last 20 minutes of tonight to answer follow-up questions like Nia had about the Chosen, or any others about what I've said so far about the Chosen, about the Bible, about Jesus, about his disciples. Feel free to type in a question into the comments, and I'll answer them as best I can. Um, if you have no questions, then I do have another, not really a question, more of an observation, but I certainly can save that for another time. But if there are no further questions, then I'll jump into that as well tonight. But feel free, I'll open it up here for a couple minutes just for you to have some time to type in a question. Or even if you say, hey, I have a question, and I'm going to type it in, let me know that your question is coming, so that I, pause and don't move on. I'll take a drink of water just to buy some time for you to raise your question. And while I'm paused, I said hi to Carla and Debbie earlier. to Jean and Kathy and Linnell, Marlene, Sheila, Nia, who asked the question, and Marge, and everyone else who is watching, either now live or later. Just again, I'm truly humbled that you choose to join me and being a part of Ask the Pastor. Um, Before I forget, also, next week is another one of those weeks we will not have Ask the Pastor. Maybe you say, "Ah," or "Okay, good to have a break." Fine. I'll be out of town. I will be coming back on Wednesday, but I don't know when I'm going to get back exactly. Probably could be back in time in order to do Ask the Pastor at 8 o'clock Central, but that's not guaranteed. So we're gonna skip a week and we'll come back at it the following on what would be that Wednesday the um, 18th. So is that right? Yeah, the 18th. So Wednesday the 18th we'll be back at it. Um, Nia asked, was Jesus' mother Mary with the disciples as shown in The Chosen? Very good question, actually, Nia. Was Jesus' mother along with them as they traveled and so on? Um, it could be. It's it's not it's not unlikely. We are told there are some times when when Mary was with Jesus. There was there's one place in I believe it's Mark chapter 3. In Mark 3, and there are parallels in the other gospels as well. In fact, I'll just open up to that to make sure. Um, where Jesus is teaching in a house or gathering with some followers in a house, and Jesus' mother and brothers come and they want to see Jesus, and and Jesus is told about this. Yeah, it's Mark chapter 3, and in Matthew 12 and Luke 8, that Jesus' mothers and brothers arrived, standing outside. They sent someone in to call to Jesus, and a crowd was sitting around him. And they said, your mother and brothers are outside looking for you. And Jesus even says, who are my brother and my mothers? And he looks around, those sitting around him, those who are listening and those who are hearing his teaching and believing, here are my brother and my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother. So he's almost redefining family in that way. And so there are at least episodes like that where Mary is involved, or she comes on the scene and she's with Jesus and in the presence of the disciples. Um, Certainly later when Jesus goes to Jerusalem where he's arrested, and uh, Mary plays prominently in that as well. Um, Likely there at the cross, because John tells us in the Gospel of John that Jesus said to John, behold your mother, and to Mary, behold your son, as he sort of entrusts John with the care of his mother. So there are some episodes at least when Mary is there, but there are other times when that's not clear. Same thing with Mary Magdalene, actually. I mean, there are times when we're told that Jesus was with the 12, or Jesus was with his quote unquote disciples, and the quote unquote disciples is not necessarily just the 12, it's all those who are following. And there were probably the 12 and some supporters who were coming along as well, including Mary, and in The Chosen, Thomas's wife is along with them, um, Mary, Jesus' mother, and so on. So it could be. Not necessarily. Not necessarily unlikely. Could be. Again, artistic license. I tend to believe that Mary was probably still in Nazareth, or um, and maybe in another place, um, but under the care of Jesus's brothers, which would have been his half brothers, right? The children of Mary and Joseph. Um, I tend to believe that for the most part, except for when they traveled to Jerusalem and when Mary and her sons were curious and asking about Jesus as he was at Capernaum and and teaching, but otherwise probably not with the disciples. But I could be wrong. So there you have it. Good question, though. Other questions that anyone has about the chosen or Jesus' disciples, that kind of thing. All right. Um, Again, if you have other questions, feel free, type them in the comments. I'll be glad to address them as best I can. Um, if you want to email me follow-up questions, if you want to send a Facebook message with follow-up questions, great. I'm glad to answer those as well. Um, Debbie asks, in The Chosen, Mary in one show uh, is having doubts or questions and went back to her old lifestyle. It doesn't say that in the Bible anywhere, does it? um, no, it doesn't. In fact, yeah, exactly. There, uh, there is no indication. In fact, this is one of those things where I was like, as I'm watching, thought, and they really spent like a whole episode where they're searching for Mary. Some of the disciples are back at camp waiting for Mary to return. A few of them are sent off, including Peter and Matthew, who are like this. I mean, they're Peter and Matthew are always clashing. Peter can't appreciate Matthew. Matthew can't understand why Peter can never accept him, and so on. But so it's sort of like Jesus very purposely chooses these two, Matthew and Peter, go find Mary. I think that that episode of Mary leaving and sort of returning to um, her uh, her lifestyle of drinking and other things like that was more of a way of depicting Jesus' scheme of getting his disciples to work together than it was about Mary or anything that it's the Gospels depict for us. Um, because as far as we know, she was, she was saved, and then she kept following Jesus. And uh, but yeah, again, that's probably significant amount of artistic license there in order to bring out you know, other truths. And yeah, I mean, this is part of storytelling, right? When you're telling a story, it's sometimes a bit natural to fill in some gaps, to embellish some things in order to highlight a point that you're trying to make. And I'm not saying it's right, but sometimes that's kind of what we do in order to make a point. I think that in The Chosen, they purposely chose to set up scenes like that in order to make other points. And that's just my guess with that. We're not told, we're not actually told all that much about Mary, Mary Magdalene. Um, some things that we know about her, or that Mary is the one connected to being the one demon possessed, and then anointing Jesus' feet, and all that. uh, really a lot of that's church tradition that is after the Bible, uh, sort of connecting the dots across the Gospels and um, for good or bad. And so we don't know actually all that much about Mary Magdalene. Certainly not that she, returned to her previous lifestyle and then, was found again. Um, Probably just Dallas Jenkins' way of saying sometimes we lapse. Sometimes we go back to old habits and old sins, and Jesus has to find us again and that kind of thing, which is true, absolutely true. But he does that in a way that depicts the gospel story for us with a little artistic license. So, another good question from Debbie. Others who have questions about The Chosen. With 9 minutes left, I'm not going to jump into the other topic I had for tonight because I just would not be able to do it justice in just 9 minutes. So I'll ask whatever or answer whatever questions you might have, and we'll break. Um, Again, I will remind everyone that next week on August 11th, we will not have Ask the Pastor, just because my travel schedule, I'll be coming back from out of town and don't think that I probably will be back in time, but I don't want to have to change plans at the last minute if I don't make it back to town in time. So we'll just plan on not having our Ask the Pastor episode next Wednesday. We will meet up again 2 weeks from tonight on August 18th. So that's that is the plan. Again, other questions? If Just looking at my calendar here real quick, making sure I have the right date in mind. If you have no other questions, we might end just a little bit early, and that is okay. Um, love the questions, love the interaction, and again, if you have questions that are sort of related, if you're watching this afterwards and I can't ask live, but I still have this question about something you said, feel free to Facebook message me. Feel free to email me. Um, Pull me aside after Sunday worship or something and ask me your question. Whatever it takes. So um, call me up on the phone. Wow, old-fashioned way, right? Call me up and ask me the question. That's fine too. So glad to answer those as best I possibly can. Not seeing any other questions, then thank you everybody for joining tonight. Glad that you're able to tune in. I will plan on seeing you, God willing, 2 weeks from tonight on August 18th for another session. If you have questions that you maybe something you've always wondered about, you think, oh, this would be a great topic for Ask the Pastor, email me, send something in so that gives me some fuel for future episodes of Ask the Pastor, because I think I know what some people's questions are sometimes, but it's better if I actually get your questions because then I'm answering what you really are asking and not just what I think you're asking. So send in the questions. If you have something is said in a devotion or something that a TV preacher said, or something you heard at another church when you were visiting, or something you read in the Bible said, I didn't know that was in the Bible. Is that really true? And just whatever, ask me those questions. I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do is try to sort through some of those challenging questions and make it approachable so that we can all learn a little bit better how to read God's truth as He gives it to us in the scriptures. So, have a great night, everybody. Again, we're ending just a little bit early, but it probably makes up for some times when I've gone over. So, have a great night, and God bless. Enjoy the summer that we have left, right? All right. God bless everyone.